I would reinvest into our community. To build stronger communities, you have to have a unified community. And I definitely think, like I said earlier, us having more open and honest conversations with the police department and their constituents, I think that we're going to start seeing us move together in the same direction, because there's no choice. There's no choice for the police department to not listen to the constituents. But we as constituents have to, what's the word I'm looking for? We have to be willing to go through this journey, because it's going to be hard. We're going to hit roadblocks. And I think that that's the first step. It's just starting to have those conversations. I know there are some organizations in our community that's pushing a police oversight board. I'm all for that. I think that's a great thing to have just right now to hold them accountable. And some of the other things that I think that I would love to see is using our public servants to be with the police department. So having social workers, having counselors and things in that nature to be out with the police department to maybe minimize some of these problems that we're seeing.
You know, people are going to talk about programs, and people are going to say that we need more programs and we need to invest more in YFD. But, you know, we invested in an $8 million YFD center here. We invested in all type of upgrades to our other YFD centers that are in District 8. We have 3, and we have 1 million programs and ways for kids to go get those outlets. It's groups like YB Normal, Father to the Fatherless, Reach One, Teach One, Fatherly Figure. It's so many groups out there that are doing things, you know, to help our kids. And so as a council person now, I have to be in the homes with the people, meet people at the doorstep where they are, and just say, you know, what is it that the parents are needing? And what is it that we can give the parents that will then instill into the child? Because they're at the end of the day, you know, our homes, our communities are what raised me as a child. We have to get back to that. This COVID has separated us even more. And when you look at the crime and the violence that's going along, and I get a lot of it in my community, and, you know, we can use any excuse to say what it is, mental health, poverty, you know, these things are, but I think one of the main things is love. We have to start loving on each other and loving on the people in our community. And I just plan to be here in the community to be the change I want to see and to show people that I love them. And I'm going to do everything I can to get you the services that you need to get help. But, you know, one thing about it is, as a council person, that's the education piece earlier. I can't force a person in their home to go get mental help. You got to have conservatorship on them. I can't force a person to even come to an opportunity for a job. You know, they have to want it themselves. And I'm just going to do everything I can to encourage the people in District 8 to get on board with this process and see that we can all win if we work together.
Well, the community, we experience a lot of the aftermath, you know, either it's over in the community where it occurs or they racing through here going home. And that's why it is so important for us to have a community mini police precinct. We need them in communities, you know, because we have the traffic, the cameras on the poles. That would really address our concerns as far as safety, you know, the seniors, the neighbors sitting on the porch. We're not able to do that much, but I would encourage and look for budget money to establish a mini police community police precinct in the District 5 community that's centralized, that's in a centralized location, because our district is from Brainerd Moore Road all the way up Highway 58. So maybe somewhere like Bunny Oaks Drive, somewhere centralized. The last one we had about 15 years ago, was located in the Eastgate Mall area, and that was very convenient. And since then, we were promised to get, you know, another one in our district. But so I'm running for that, to call in that marker, that promise. I think it should be another way to approach crime also. You know, they tried the VRI, and they tried that. That's all I want to say.
So about a year ago, I started an organization called the Chattanooga Urban Policy Institute to specifically address crime, not just in my district, but throughout the other neighboring districts that have seen an influx in violent crimes, particularly amongst African-American males that could be gang related. And we teamed up with UTC and we were like, okay, why are people committing crimes, right? What is the problem? And again, it boils down to this poverty issues, this access to opportunities. Then we also discovered that it also had to do with trauma-informed care. You know, some people make poor decisions because of the trauma they lived either as a minority or just because of poverty issues. And so we teamed up with my organization, the Chattanooga Urban Policy Institute, teamed up with UTC and some other providers. And we're like, let's get some of the most violent criminals in our community, and let's just not label them, but let's help them, right? And so I think one way of reducing crime is to address that issue, correct? I also believe that if we create more job opportunities for people who don't have it, you don't have time to do crime because you're at work, you know what I mean? So there's it's a big piece to bite off and to try to solve in one fell swoop. I think we need to revitalize the violence reduction initiative that's more comprehensive and not just with $300,000 in the budget. I think we need to put our money where our mouth is. If we want to reduce violence, we've got to put the funding in the appropriate places. Hint, the appropriate places that deal with the systemic issues on why violence is up in the first place. And so I hope as a council person to bring my experience in the Policy Institute and how we address reducing crime into some legislation from city council that we can use throughout the city.
It's an initiative that has to take all of us. It's not just an initiative for council members. Like the community have to have a buy-in into reducing crime that's happening as well. But we can't really address crime without talking about the historical disadvantages that a lot of these communities have, right? And we often say, well, because the news media and social media and everybody, they hype it up. Oh, well, there was a shooting in East Chattanooga. Oh, there was a shooting in Eastdale. Oh, and the areas that are predominantly Black. But we don't talk about the escalated crime that's happened in our Brainerd area, in the 37421 area codes. And we don't talk about that, right? It's silenced more so, and it's swept up under the rug. But once we really talk about it and be honest about what the data is presenting and change the narrative of the conversation that's happening in poor Black communities, right? And poor whites. And that when we change that narrative, people have a different view of what's actually happened when it comes to crime. So we most definitely want shootings to cease. And so we have to give people the opportunity, but they have to have the drive to want to change their lifestyles and want to do better, right? And that's a decision that the individual have to make. So I can go to the person and say, hey, we've got all these services to offer you to help you improve your life. But if that individual decides to walk away and say, I don't want to be involved in any of those things, we've presented the opportunity and they have that right to make that decision. So it shouldn't fall on the wheelhouse of the council to say, we've got to do something about crime, because it's something that the entire community have to be involved in. And then we have to get back to taking control of our communities and not be afraid to report things. Like, we've got so caught up in saying people are snitches, but we have to get back into the reality of informing people about if they're doing something wrong. Even if you see the young man outside of your door, we can say, hey, young man, you know that's not right. Or why would you do that? I'm going to give your parent a phone call. We should be able to have those conversations within our community, and hopefully it doesn't lead to, a tragic event. And then we also have to be brave warriors. When we see acts that are happening that's criminal, we can intervene, right? I've had to intervene, and others have intervened. But if we let our people know that you're loved, you're valued, you're more than just what you're going to throw your life away for, and I think, they'll begin to understand that and transition. And then we have to be a supportive hub around our parents, right? Because we discussed, like, parents are working 2-3 different jobs. A lot of our homes are single parent led, and it's a hardship, and people begin to migrate to groups that's going to make them feel like they're important, make them feel like they're loved, and then they gear to the criminal behavior. So we have to make sure that we're supporting everybody, and that's how we reduce it.
It's getting down to the core of the issue. Systemic poverty creates these type of issues. I'm not saying that isn't all, poverty areas or high poverty areas, but that creates an environment, we always stressed out when things are going on. That's part of the problem. And then you also have to look at, what's going on. You have nobody doing anything. People are in the house all the time. I think COVID pushed it in a way that you're forced in a house, you're forced around the same people, and it has created this anxiety, this stress. So it's just looking at the data and saying what caused these shootings. Was it domestic violence type issues? Was it were they gang related? Were they isolated incidents? Where were they? So first thing to do is take a look at the data and say what caused these issues, and then address those issues at the core. Like I said, sometimes it may be poverty, the conditions of systemic poverty. It could be, like I said, domestic violence. It could be an isolated incident. So you have to really look at it and look at those individual incidents and say, what is it? Where did it come from? And then address it at its core. So to me, that's how you start dealing with a problem, is looking at, where did it start? What is the root of this? And then address it from that perspective. So I believe that change can happen and things can be done, but we have to first look at that data comprehensively and determine how we want to address those issues.
I think one thing is more general patrolling in the district. And I think we really need to go back to neighborhood watch. I've talked to a lot of folks in this area when I've been canvassing, and we've talked about a sense of community. And there was years ago that a lot of folks were involved with neighborhood watch. And just, if you're seeing something that doesn't look right, go ahead and report it. So I think that would be a good first step. And I know that we are strapped with funding for police, but I would like to get more patrol work going.
I think, again, it's relationships and working with the police department. Again, in all my neighborhoods, there's issues of crime and efforts to do there. I think that, 2020 was not a good year for Chattanooga, and our budget process was, that was not one of our finest hours. I think that, again, and I think from an activist point of view is being able to sort of sit down, have the relationships with the various hierarchy of the police department is to be done that. But then again, that leadership has to come out of the mayor's office, and it's got to be a focus. Community policing is crucial. I spent, afternoon on Saturday with some of the leaders of East Lake, Neighborhood Association. And that, their eyes on the grounds. Neighborhood watch programs are strong. We need to encourage more of those. But when you have neighbors that will call and say there's a suspicious person out there, it's then incumbent on the Chattanooga Police Department to sort of respond. Again, I'll go back to in my days as chief of staff, when we brought in Chief Jimmy Dotson to be the police chief, there was a strong focus on really sort of more community policing, and that's continued in bits and pieces. But I think we just need to continue to make it a priority.
There's a good question, a fair question regarding public safety, and I did a study myself. I looked at the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. And they indicated that most crimes in 2018, everything was going up. Everything was going up. Burglaries, simple assaults, rapes, homicide, murder, all that was going up. Then I further saw that the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, was saying that 40% of all the calls for the peace officers involve mental illness, people with mental illness. So I think one way we can, and it noted that there's a high percentage of Chattanooga crimes are not solved. And I think as a leader in the city, when I become city councilman, I would suggest that we involve social workers, we involve caseworkers, to deal with those who have mental illness, so that our police department can help solve some of those unsolved crimes. because they noted that Chattanooga at that point is the 23rd most dangerous city in America. So we need to help out our police as best we can. I think that's one of the solutions we can take.
First, I want to say that to me, it's critical that everyone in District 2, but also throughout our entire city, that everyone feel safe in their homes and also as they move about our city. And that is a foundational value for me as I think about how we keep our, the culture of how we keep our community safe. As for lowering crime, specifically in District 2, the needs that we have largely are car break-ins and the occasional home break-in. But also our neighbors are really frustrated with motorcycles and some other vehicles that race up and down Hickson Pike and Norcross. It's very disturbing noise-wise, but also terribly unsafe for everyone else that's traveling those roads. And what I'm learning is it's quite a complicated issue, because if the police were to chase those people, then that adds another element of high speed traffic on the roads. So that's one that I don't have the done and dusted answer for how we fix that problem, but I can tell you that our neighbors in District 2 want to make sure that our first responders are all paid fairly for the work that they do, going back to that $15 an hour minimum wage conversation, and that everyone in the city knows that they belong in the city, and that we're always getting better with the way that we take care of our citizens and keep everybody safe.
My main motto, I always say, building relationships builds communities. We have to develop relationships not only with our neighbors, we have to develop relationships with our law enforcement. We have to develop relationships with our elected officials. And I think as far as the law enforcement is concerned, the police department, I think they should focus on assigning the police officers to the neighborhoods in which they're familiar, or the neighborhoods in which they have relationships. And they say, well, we don't have many police officers that live in our area, in our district or whatever. I'm just saying hypothetically. Well, then we will go on a scouting venue and start scouting for to hire police officers from this area. And even those police officers that don't live in this area, maybe they need to start developing relationships with people. And I think the police department have to really buckle down on their hiring practices and who they hire. And when they do background checks, they need to go deeper than just that. In the court system, they have a thing called PSI, pre-sentence investigation. And that is a strong investigative part. I think they should do something similar to that prior to the hiring of these police officers, and make sure they have the mentality and the empathy for the citizens, and know that they are hired to serve and to protect. You know, and I also think that our judicial system have to really step up to the plate. And when these bad apples commit crimes against people of color, they need to be held accountable as well. So it's, you know, everybody's got to be involved. There's got to be relationship development throughout the whole city.
One thing that I have learned over my years of working with people and working with families is we have to understand, in order for us to take something away, we have to be willing to put something back. So if we're going to remove the guns from those people that have access to them, what are you then in return putting back into them? We should be investing in more programs that focus on mental health wellness. We should be willing to invest in programs that teach our younger generation the importance of financial literacy, teaching them the importance of being a simple law-abiding citizen. So that is one way that I'm willing to work directly with the constituents of my district in making sure we find a way to lower crime. It's more than just increasing or amping up the security of our police officers, although police officers do a wonderful job, but it's all about making sure we understand what our residents and the people are dealing with. If we're not willing to focus on the issues that burden them the most, then we're not going to get anywhere. We're just going to see, we can't fight fire with fire. We have to find another way to put that fire out.
Well, first of all, communication. One of the things that Captain Gibbons and I do, and it's a little disappointing because I wish more people from the district would come out and join us, obviously post-COVID, but pre-COVID, we hold meetings every month called CPIC. And I go to those meetings and I have a few people from the district that show up, but it's a great opportunity for us to build collaboration with our Chattanooga Police Department, to build relationships, to strengthen community. The Chattanooga Police Department has programs like Front Porch Lineup that encourages people to ask, and they'll come to your business and they'll do their beginning of their shifts at your business. And it's an opportunity to get to know. We have National Night Out, which is huge. The important thing to do what we're doing right now, and I can tell you, let me go back to Captain Gibbons. We work very closely together on one of our social media outlets called Nextdoor, if you're familiar with that. And Captain Gibbons is a really, really proactive in that. And he and I respond. We post a lot of information. I post a lot of Chattanooga Police Department information on my personal or on my Facebook page. And of course, the other part of that is over the last 4 years, my counterpart in the county, which is Commissioner Smedley, we have hosted 4 times a year joint city and county meetings where we bring in the sheriff's department, we bring in the city police, and a variety of speakers to represent different areas of the city. So I would go with communication. And if you look hard enough, you will find an opportunity to learn and to reach out to us. If you don't want to look for that, then I guess you won't find it. But I think that is critical. And we have several mechanisms in place. We could always improve on things. Obviously, we're all human. But I think that we are moving through communication. And I believe that there's some good work, some good groundwork already laid there.
I'm pretty fortunate that in District 2, our crime rates are relatively low. But what I would say, I had a meeting with folks in the police department last week talking about just this topic. I don't know of a harder job that you could be doing right now than being a policeman in America. There is a target on the back of folks that are working incredibly hard to try to do something really, really good for our community. And the vast majority of those folks are just hardworking, salt of the earth, good people. And obviously there have been some circumstances where there have been people that have done things that I don't think anybody finds right, that have painted a lot of other policemen with a brush that is very unattractive. And it's clear to me, and certainly I think the Chattanooga Police Department recognizes that we've got to improve the dialogue between the citizens and the police department. We need a situation where the police are reaching out to the communities that they're in and operating in a manner with a set of guidelines that create trust. And I think that they certainly are interested in doing that. We need to make sure they've got the technology they need so that they can have body cameras and other appropriate equipment where they can, for both their own protection and the protection of the citizenry, record those interactions and make sure that the real story is available so that we can reduce some of the confusion around incidents. I think being a policeman would be incredibly tough. If you think about the nature of the day-to-day interactions of things that a policeman has to do, it's just a hard job. And I'm committed to making sure that the police department is funded in a way where they can recruit the sort of folks they need. And I believe that we need proper oversight. We need a quality independent oversight committee, and we've got the starts of one now. But we need to make sure that that body is functioning in a way that it's doing everything it needs to do, so that citizens will feel confident that what's happening in the Chattanooga Police Department is in the best interest of all the citizens in Chattanooga.
I'm not sure in my district, some of the shootings are as prevalent as in other districts of the city. So it's going to be important, I would think, for the council, as with any issue, to be working together to kind of understand what they're seeing and what are we seeing and what do we think we're hearing and what's driving some of that. I personally think crime and the shootings in particular, I don't think it's just about crime. I think there are other issues underlying that, right? It's quality of the neighborhoods, quality of the community. What are we doing as far as, presenting alternatives to, and I think gangs, to some extent and a large extent, maybe come into the shootings. What are we doing to present alternatives to improve neighborhoods, improve living conditions? Show people, hey, here's a path, and give them the training or the guidance to get on alternative paths. Again, I think there are a lot of folks in our area that are working hard on that. But, again, that's one where I think the city can drive some consistent policies to address. And I think, and I give the Hamilton County Schools a lot of credit. They, I think, are doing everything they can, not only to educate, but to try to improve lives, especially in affected communities. So I think it's an issue that requires a comprehensive solution. I don't think you can just say, hey, we got to increase police or whatever and crack down on gangs. I think it's a multifaceted, comprehensive approach to stem that kind of violence.
Crime is based on various different social dynamics. One of the things that we have to change when we think about changing the landscape of public and community safety is that we cannot continue to punish people, and that has not solved any of our problems. Locking people up, threatening to send them to prison forever has not, obviously, by your statistics, stop any level of gun violence that's happening at a community level. So what are the things that we can begin to do to break the cycle? This is why it was so important for us as protest leaders to make the demands of focusing more on behavioral and mental health. The problem that we have is that when you have concentrated poverty, when you have vast miseducation, when you have lack of economic opportunity, what you have is a perfect storm or a perfect situation where people who are locked into various different social dynamics are having to fight for limited resources. It shouldn't be that way in a city that makes $1 billion in revenue every single year. So the things that I would like to do is, how can we bring more economic opportunity to the community in the form of small business, as well as connecting young people and transitioning adults to technology and the jobs of the future that are going to be available, like at Nippon Paint, at the Boone High Singer site. I will also have to say is I have 14 schools in my district, all the way from elementary school to UTC and Chattanooga State. So how can I connect our young people to have a passion and love for education, and then make sure that they have an idea of who and what they want to be when they get older, and how can I get them all the way from elementary school to college? So those are some of the things that I would like to do, is be a support system for the people and to seek a different outlet or outcome that is not looking to punish people, but to heal people in our community and show them that they can do so much better and they deserve better.
Well, I think a lot of it is addressing those issues that a lot of people do not want to touch. You have to go, and it's a lot of struggling homes that a lot of these youths are turned to the streets. There are so many different things. If you talk to a lot of our youth that's in gangs, we'll just use that, and you ask them, why are you in a gang? They'll give you a large array of reasonings as to why. Some of them, you know, they feel love, they feel that they're part of something, you know, they're belonging to something, but they don't understand it's a taboo, it's a mirage, that once you get in trouble something, you out there by yourself then. You're back to where you started from. So I think we have to do a lot of more education and more helping and teaching to the parent, to the homes, to the family. When you are able to teach them and show them different things on how to do what they do to be able to be a successful family, that can produce a different outcome. Sometimes people do what they do because that's all they have seen and that's all they know. So you have to give them a different perspective into a way to where they understand this is how you set yourself up to be a more productive citizen, a more productive person. And a lot of that comes with, you know, the same subject we just been talking about: jobs, you know, adequate living, the environment. I think we need to do a better job with police and community relations, to where you get back to knowing that a lot of communities that crime is low is because they know the lady across the street, if she see you doing something, she's going to call 911. You know, they're going to report things that, you know, it's quick response with the police to that area. So I think that we have to do more education. I think locking them up is not the answer, but we have to here again get to the root as to why they're doing what they're doing, the crimes, the gun violence. What is causing that? We need to get to the root issue as to not just say, well, they doing it because just what it's generally something else that's triggering that mechanism. And some of it is mental, some of it is some family issues that we need to do a better job with the social services, working with them, better fund them to be able to do some things that they do. You know, a lot of the social services that we rely on so heavily are so underfunded. And so I think by helping them, better funding and doing some of these things to help the family, I think it will cut down. It won't eliminate it, but I think it will cut down on some of the gun violence and some of the violent crimes that we see in the city, holding people accountable.
I wish I had a simple answer to that. I think if anybody knew how to lower crime, we would have done it a million times over. There's a lot that has been tried by the Burke administration to address crime. And while we can say we've reduced significantly gang violence, crime and shootings are still occurring. There is still somebody pulling a trigger. There is still somebody getting hit by a bullet. Whether it's a gang member or not, it is still a serious issue that we need to be addressing in the city. So some of the steps that I've been active in taking is supporting not just the police department from a staffing perspective, but from a technology perspective. So the Arctic, the Real-Time Intelligence Center, we've invested fully in that so that we can better communicate about crimes and be able to solve, frankly, a lot of these crimes faster than they were. We had cold cases stacked up beyond belief just because of the lack of technology and communications between different departments to be able to help solve a lot of those crimes. So that's one tool we're able to put in. We also invested in high-end ballistic software so that we can track what takes place from these scenes and tie guns to these events and then be able to tie it to people so that we can close these cases and actually find the people that are perpetrating the crimes better and faster. So there are some things that we can do from that regard. Overall, it's a systematic problem as well that there is no single answer to. We've got to do better to make sure that people have opportunities to provide for themselves. We need to make sure that they feel good about the neighborhoods they live in, and the city can invest in those things. We can help make sure the police have the resource to prevent and solve those crimes when they happen. But at the same time, we need to be focused on, again, you mentioned paving. Something as simple as paving a neighborhood road, putting in sidewalks and streetlights improves that area significantly from a safety standpoint as well. So there are infrastructure needs that actually improve public safety. And we got to remember those when we talk infrastructure. It's not just about paving. It's about improving public safety at the same time when we're willing to step back and look at the whole picture. So there's more of that type of thing that I would like to see done in a lot of our neighborhoods across Chattanooga.
Well, for one, we get funding for having a higher crime rate. So it kind of is, it's almost counterintuitive. So I want the police to focus on crimes with victims instead of things like simple possession. Every hour we spend on victimless crimes, we could have been spent on solving more violent crimes or theft. So I think that once we can restore the community trust with the police, then we can start seeing those crime levels drop back down.
So I think definitely reinvesting, that's something that we've been talking a lot about with my campaign team, taking some of the funding and putting it into better training, putting it into our community, because again, having a strong community helps lower crime. And one of those other things that I've been kind of speaking about in the early half of the campaign was a Future Readiness Institute. I definitely think that if we input something with our police department to where in their training in the police academy where it's kind of like student teaching for teachers. You know, right before you become a teacher, you're student teaching, you're shadowing, you're there, your presence is felt, you're kind of going through all the motions, but you're not ultimately responsible. So I think it would be great to have police in the communities and, you know, they're not armed, they're solely there for their presence. So people can start to build trust with them, build relationships. Because, you know, I think if you look anywhere online, a lot of traffic stops that are very minor, whether it's a tail light or you're speeding, it shouldn't result to someone being killed. It should be taken care of right then and there. And in my mind, I'm thinking if I got pulled over by Officer Sarah, and I'm like, oh, I remember you were in a Future Readiness Institute and you have some kind of familiarity with me. I definitely think that will help stop so much of this injustices that we've been seeing from George Floyd to Mike Brown. I think that would cut that out a little bit. And, you know, if that doesn't work, I'm always willing to go back to the drawing board, but that's just a solution that I think that we should try at least.
One of the things that, you know, back again, see, that's what I love about this council. We've done a lot of things even before the George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement happened this year. We had already put in place our PARC, Police Advisory Committee. And that right there is the foundation to see what's going on. They just gave us our quarterly report, and it's some things that needs to be changed inside the police force when it comes to their body cameras or their car cameras. You shouldn't leave the police station if your car camera or your body camera is not working. That's something that we're definitely going to fight to put in policy. Things that happen in other cities, I want to say is very tragic. And what happened to George Floyd was tremendously, and Breonna Taylor, these were tragedies that shouldn't happen to no person on earth. But in Chattanooga, a lot of these things are not happening. Not saying that our CPD is perfect. They're not. They have blood on their hands and they have, you know, guilt in their closets. But every officer wearing a badge is not a racist. It's not looking to hurt anyone. Just like every kid walking around these poor communities with a gun is not a gangbanger, you know? So we have to first address Chattanooga problems and address the things that are going on in Chattanooga and address each officer accordingly. And I think this police oversight board that we have in place will report to us quarterly and tell us the things to strengthen that base. And once we get that in place, I think you will see things start to grow and become a lot better. Perfect? Never perfect, but we will see a better way than a lot of these other states are doing. And that's one of my plans to make sure of, to invest and fuel that PARC board, because they're right there seeing the mistakes and the winning things that the police is doing. So they then report to us every 3 months. And I think that will give us the leverage to say, hey, we need to adjust and address these things. And I'm sure our police chief will be willing to do it.
Well, saying defund is a hot word. I don't think you just have to defund. I think you can utilize the money that is meant to respond to the social services calls, and you know, you still use that money, but you get the right people in those positions, not just your, you know, your officers. You need professional people, and just move that money over to fund the positions, which would be the same positions under the one funding budget. You just having more people that's specializing in responding to social services calls. And I wouldn't want to defund, but maybe you may not have to increase the budget right now till you look over everything.
I believe, I definitely so. So let me just be upfront. I believe in diverting funds from the police department, and not because they're not doing a good job, but it's just because I think there are other ways to address crime. I think we can divest that money and reinvest it into some social programs that I just mentioned, in helping people get back on their feet, job opportunities, economic opportunities, mental health opportunities, right? So I do believe in that. I will support a decrease in that budget. I'm not sure by what percentage, but I think, you know, it says a lot, because, you know, budgets are moral documents, right? You see where people spend money, like, okay, that must be where your priority is. And the budget is large. and I'm thinking to myself, like, if our police budget is that large, that means we have a big problem. And with crime or just maybe some issues with prioritizing budget stuff. You know, it says a lot when it's just that disproportional to the other city services. And so that needs to be evaluated, and we need to divest in that. I support policing reform. The country has a police violence issue. My family successfully sued the Chattanooga Police Department for a police violence issue against my smaller brother. I work with the Equity Alliance out of Nashville, and we specifically talk about police reform. And so this is something near and dear to my heart. I have a lot of respect for the police department. I think we need policing, but I think we need to make sure that they're not disproportionately policing the African-American community. They need to understand the racial disparities in police and community policing. And they really need to weed out people who are insensitive to the African-American community, or who may have racial biases towards Black people. There are, as we know, there are police officers who are white supremacists. There are police officers who do not understand the Black culture, and they're biased. And when you're biased, you may cause problems for people you don't like, pretty much. And so I'm for evaluating, researching, and getting to the bottom of that. And I think one of the first places to start is analyzing that budget and decreasing it, and reinvesting those funds back into the community.
I think it was great that the protesters came out. And I think that a lot of people didn't even realize that we were already doing those things as a city, right? And a lot of times, like I say, people will automatically view public safety as a police issue, but there's all kinds of things that are in that budget that's under public safety in the police budget, right? When we're talking about our firefighters, the first responders, for them, when we're talking about lights for our street, paving, sidewalks, those social services, victim services, all of those things are up under the police budget. So we're already doing those things. So even if we remove those services and say, we're gonna put it over Office of Family Empowerment, it's still something that we were already doing. It's a public safety issue. When we're talking about our mental health and different things like that, it comes back to public safety. But when our community members, we're reactionary. And when we're in that moment, we're not taking time to really hear or to understand the budget. Because right now we're talking about, we want something that's a microwave fix. And it sounds good to be on a bullhorn and saying all these things, when in reality, the city of Chattanooga are already doing these things, right? Do we need to partner more with more organizations? Yes, I would love to really identify the key services that we have. What I would love to see with our police not being the first call, and a lot of times they're not the first on the scene, it's our firefighters. But we don't know that because we're always talking about the police. You know what I mean? Our firefighters will get on the scene and determine like, hey, who needs to be called next? And then, and sometimes when the police get there and arrive, they could be in that heated moment altercation. So, and if we realize that this person has mental issues going on, then yes, I think it needs to be a different approach. Our police shouldn't service those calls. We should have a routing system that can route, hey, if it's something mental going on, if it's somebody that's homeless, if it's somebody, you know, different things like that. And if it's an emergency, then yeah, deploy the police to go out and take care of it because that's their role. They're supposed to protect and serve our communities. Now, once they get to the point where they're violating policies and, you know, escalating tactics and straight pulling out guns and you beating and all that kind of thing, that's a whole nother different story, right? But as far as divesting funds from the police department, there's no reason to divest it because those services, those core things that the protesters are asking for, we're already doing that, and it needs to stay in the budget. Now it can be moved under another entity, but that funding for those things, it needs to stay.
Being an African-American female, watching people that look like me get killed, for no reason, watching people that look like me and their sons and daughters being hurt, it made me frustrated. And I understood exactly where everyone was coming from. It was ridiculous. So my position is with the defund the police, I'm more into reinvesting into our priorities, taking a comprehensive look at the budget and saying, where can we allocate funds for social services? Where can we allocate funds for additional police training? Wanting to recruit more minorities onto police forces to make sure, because it's a big problem. It's not just, you know, this one thing, because people are set in their minds about certain people, about certain things. So it's not just a police problem, but it's a mindset problem. It is people think certain ways about certain people. You can see it when you're walking down the street. You can see it when you walk past somebody. So it's a bigger issue than that. But unfortunately, you know, a lot of that gets onto the police force with people, with the way they think about certain types of people. And it bleeds out, and it's horrible. And I just hate what happened this summer. It just gets me in a, you know, gets me very agitated, very irritated to see that. But as far as defunding the police, I'm more into reinvestment, reallocation, taking a comprehensive look at the budget and saying, what can we do to reinvest into our communities, reinvest into our youth, and also put one of the great things I think we've done here in the city, 3 great things. We passed the Community Police Advisory Board. I like that with the city. I think it needs more legs on it, but it's a good start. We also have the Racial Equity Dashboard. I think that is wonderful. Also the Police Incident Data Dashboard. Also, I think that is great to keep up, to hold them accountable so that we can all see what is going on. So I'm 100% for reviewing the budget comprehensively to reallocate and reinvest into priorities for our youth and for social service activities within the city.
So first of all, I would not recommend defunding the police. I think we need to find some available funding to do some other things. So first of all, I know that in some precincts, they do have a person riding along with the police in case, and they're crisis counselors. So if you have someone that's having mental health issues or is just distraught over something, that they can approach the person rather than the police directly being the first person to talk with them. So I think that would be beneficial to expand services like that. The other thing is, and this kind of goes back to the Fight for 15, I would like to see us pay our police officers more because they're putting their lives on the line of safety for us. But I also would have higher expectations. So for higher pay, we expect more. And I think that would be a good first step.
I think that, again, we need to sort of seize the moment and look at it. And I think that the whole idea of using social workers is something I don't think the police department has any problem with it. One of the concerns you have is you can't just sort of say, let's take $20 million from the police department, and put it somewhere. I'm not sure we have the infrastructure, people infrastructure capacity to do that. And I think what I haven't been able to find or see is that I think there were a lot of great ideas that came out of, the unfortunate, situation that we had. But we were doing it almost as enemies. I mean, we weren't doing a lot of talking together and sitting down. I think that, clearly, in a lot of those reforms, we need to go back to the root causes, which is, is education becomes that. I mean, I think in a lot of the heated arguments or discussions that came out, I probably believe in 70–80% of what was said. I don't believe that defunding police is the way you do it, and I don't think that, I think when you start talking about education or Parks and Rec centers or YFD centers or whatever you call it, it's not one or the other. It's got to be both. And that's not and I haven't sat down and gone through a line by line item of the police department, but I have heard enough experts sort of say is that we ought to use this time to sort of really look at how you reimagine police. What I don't know, and where again I'll be glad to be part of convening and bringing people to the table, is that just because you say it's a good idea, the key is how you implement that. And so I don't have a hesitancy in the world to say that we've got to sort of really look at how we do that. If we're going to step up more after school programs, we need to be sure we have the capacity to go do that. If we're going to bring in social workers to work on these issues, we need to be sure that there's a structure and a plan for how we do it.
In my opinion, I think I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a Black man. And I see that there's no reason to defund the police department. We need to reform the police department, maybe investing in diversity and inclusion as far as training and taking military style guns from the police and taking guns altogether off the streets from civilians. And I wholeheartedly believe in community policing. There's in every neighborhood in District 5, our neighbors are police officers. And there was a time growing up, we knew our police officers. And they knew every little boy at the center. They knew all the old ladies in the neighborhoods. They knew everything. If we had that rapport, that type of community policing, I think that would definitely improve the condition of this city and any city in America when we go in that community style policing.
Again, to reiterate, everyone in Chattanooga needs to feel safe when they're in their own home and when they go about the city. And I recognize that if we have a segment of our population that feels unsafe, that's something we've got to study. We've got to lean into the difficult conversations, be willing to have them, be willing to listen carefully, and figure out how to make it better. In every other part of our city structure, we're constantly pressing for improvement, and we need to do the same thing with public safety. So I've learned a lot and heard a lot of ideas related to additional mental health resources, for example, for our police department, additional training for our police department. And those are all things that I would be very open to having conversations about.
I know the old cliche is, if you're going to really change a person's mind, you get to their pocketbook, but the budget that was passed this recently has already taken some funds from the police department. So my main concern is if they're going to not defund the police department, make sure that the funds that the police department is getting is allocated to training. And like I said, take care of the relationship with the police personnel. So I know it's a hard situation when you say defund. You can't put everybody in one basket. You can't put all the bad apples. You can't make everybody suffer for a fraction of those who are making mistakes. Just like the racial unrest that's going on in our country. Now, we saw several thousands of people going to the Capitol and causing all of this violence. Well, that's not the majority of our citizens in the United States. I say that's a few bad apples. It's a lot of bad apples, but it's a few when you're talking about the percentage of those Americans that are here. Now, they need to be held accountable. And I know I just jumped over to another level, but that's the reality of it.
Seeing as how you mentioned the protests that happened this past summer, I was actually a part of some of those protests because a lot of the issues weigh heavy on my heart. You know, we don't like to see people that look like us or people in general being done wrong. We understand that there is a right and a wrong way to do things. And sometimes when you go to find something and you seek for something and you see that it's just not working, then we have to go back and take another look at that and say, hey, what can we do to solve this problem? So when it comes to reallocating certain funds that are being given to the police department that is in excess, then let's find a way to move those funds into programs that would benefit our communities. If the police department has over $200,000 that they just use, randomly and at their discretion, is that something that you can do without? And let's put that back directly into the community, not into the pockets of those that are in leadership or not into programs that won't do anything, but we actually need to put this money in programs in our communities directly. And also there was an amendment that was voted on back on election November 4th that created a police review committee. One thing that I'm committed to do is if and when I am elected for the District 5 seat, I want to take another look at that amendment, because this amendment does not necessarily give this committee any type of power in regards to reviewing complaints on our police officers. But what it does, it just says, this committee looks at this complaint and then moves on to the next. But what if a police officer has done something extremely wrong? What are you going to do? How are you going to work with the police department to make sure this officer is being held accountable? So I most certainly would be more than willing to relook at that amendment to see about giving this committee just more power in regards to complaints towards our police officers.
So the first answer is I'm not for defunding the police and never have been. What I am for is proactive measures. If we all as human beings think that we are without improvement or needed improvement, then I think that's the first flaw. I think we all heard a very loud and clear message and concern, and I think that it changed a lot of our perspective and it brought awareness, as it should. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, don't agree with some of the tactics. I do think, though, that the result of that is an understanding and also a willingness for improvement. So if you're talking about increased training for our police officers, absolutely. I'll take any training I can get that will help me do my job better. So I think the willingness of the Chattanooga Police Department to embrace that is not only been very well documented, but that's not going to come through defunding them. That's going to come through supporting them. And I think that we're all in this together, and I think that we should do more together. Instead of trying to tear something apart, we need to start building each other up.
I don't believe in defunding the police, but that at the same time, I think there certainly are plenty of community programs with regards to reaching out to communities that need help that we need to be looking at. I think what the Chattanooga Police Department is attempting to do, this sort of leads to an interesting little side story. I had an interaction with a policeman over in the Brainerd area several weeks ago. And I put to him the question, you're out in your community talking with folks on a daily basis. Do you feel like that most of them would vote to have a greater police presence or a lesser police presence in their neighborhood? And he said, it's unequivocally, they would prefer a greater police presence. You referred earlier to the violence statistics here in Chattanooga in the last year. And, you know, I think most people want police in their neighborhood and they want them patrolling, but at the same time, they want to know that their intentions are good, that the oversight that they need is in place, and that the policies and procedures they're operating by are designed to ensure the rights and the safety of the citizens that they're interacting with. And I think it's incredibly important that we get all of those points right and make sure that we've got the oversight we need to ensure that if there is an incident, and there's going to be some, it's just unavoidable by virtue of the nature of the work, but that the citizens get a fair say, and that the behavior of the police department is looked after, and if someone needs to be held to account, they are.
I don't support defunding the police. If we're looking to grow Chattanooga and to attract new businesses and to grow existing businesses, you know, those businesses and those families behind those businesses want to know that they are in a safe city. And quite frankly, the foundational role of government is to provide, you know, protect life, property, and livelihood. And I think defunding the police works against the foundational basis of government. You can have reform, right, without defunding the police. And I think, you know, I think that's ongoing. I think there's been some work done with that. The park is one way you kind of do that. I think the police department has existing programs where they try to dial in and be connected to the community. And maybe there's a little more awareness that can be put out there about how that outreach, neighborhood policing from CPD is going. But I think, you know, we've got to maintain the foundational basis of providing a safe city. But at the same time, I don't think that precludes talking about reform or ways that we can improve accountability. One thing, you look at the budget, and a little concerning to me is that in the current year budget, there was a reduction in the amount allocated to police training and recruitment. It was a fairly substantial reduction there. And I think if we want to have a better, right, police force, a more accountable, more responsive, you know, I think training is very important. And I think recruiting the right people is very important as well.
Absolutely. Divestment has happened all across the country. As a protest leader here in the city of Chattanooga, that was at the top of our demands. One thing that most people do not know, because very little people have been encouraged to be educated through our budgeting process, is the city of Chattanooga in the last 4 years has gone from a $55 million budget for the police to about $75 million. That's a $20 million increase. We could have not only brought all of our city workers up to an equitable wage with that investment, but still had some money left over to invest in things like CARTA, to invest in things like YFD centers, the library, and various other things. And so the thing that people need to understand and not have any panic about is that divesting from the police does not mean that we are slashing police services. What that means is we have to understand police respond at the end of a social dynamic, whether we're talking about a property crime or a physical crime or a harm to someone in the community. By the time they show up, the situation has already happened. Did we prevent any of the steps that led up to that action to where the police had to respond? And so that's the way that we have to, again, reimagine public safety. We have to put these things into breaking cycles. So by the time we do get to the police, if we have to get to the police, there's no reason for them, right? A person drinking may not be drinking just because, they might be drinking because they're depressed. And so they need somebody who can help them with their behavioral circumstances. When I lost my grandmother, who was the matriarch of my family, there were days I didn't want to get out of bed. There were days where I could not function as a human being because I missed the woman who had been there for me all of my life. So many of us understand that we just go through things in life where we need support, and it's no disrespect to the people who choose that as a career path, but there are so many different other areas where we need to be reinvesting budget funds that are really going to break the social dynamics that lead to crime and criminal behavior.
Well, I would support anything that's about collaboration and relationship. Okay. When you start talking about defunding and taking money away, then something in that department is going to suffer to absorb that loss. So if you take money away to put into something else, and they say, well, we got to cut back on the homicide division. I don't think you want that. You know, when you need someone to come out and solve a murder or solve a crime, I think we have to be careful as to when you start talking about taking money for this to do this. A lot of the stuff that we're doing, that it's good ideal in theory, but we have to go look at how our local government structure is set up. Our local charter would say we're city council, since that's what I'm running from, is dictated by the state. So it's a lot of things that we want to do that is prohibited in our charter and our guidelines from the state. So it won't be able to be done anyway. So it's really a fight that you're really not going to win legally. It's a moral victory when you get out there and talk about it, but legally, you're not gonna win that battle. And I think what we do need to do is we need to create better relationship, and we need to hold our police officers accountable. We need to hold the leadership of the CPD accountable, the chief of police, the deputy chiefs, the lieutenants, the captains, all the way, the sergeants, the detectives. We need to hold accountability to internal affairs to make sure that when these types of things are done, that is something actually really done. It's not thrown in a file with a whole bunch of other files and hoping over a period of time it blows away. No, we have got to address these issues. We have got to be transparent with these issues. But I think more so than that, we have to do a better job of creating better relationships, and we have to do a better job of all people are equal. You cannot have dialogue when it's one-sided. You have to understand that everyone was created equal. And when you go in that business, you carry yourself and you do your job in that manner. Some of that stuff eliminates, some of that stuff cuts down, but I think we need to have more training of community relations and how to deal with certain situations that maybe some of them are not that well trained in the area of dealing with. Say, if you're approaching a mental case person that has a weapon, how do you deal with that? Who do you need to have a counselor on hand with you? How do we deal with that to where it does not end in a death because you didn't know that this person has some mental issues or whatnot? So I think we need to do a better job of training and those type of things. But taking money, if you set up another thing and take that money, give it to them, then who's going to oversee the other place that you're taking that money and switching it to? It becomes the same thing. It's a cycle. So what we have to do is hold people accountable. If they're not doing what they're supposed to do, get rid of them. Get someone else in that's going to do. But I think we can accomplish this by having more understanding on both sides, showing love, and being able to treat everyone equally.
I don't support defunding at all. That's no surprise. I was very clear about that through the entire process. And I will say this, though. Our police department, I don't know that there's any officer that would tell you that they think that from the days of the first police departments that they would have to deal with everything that they deal with today. I think that is a fair statement. A lot of what came up had to do with mental health and situations like that. Is an officer the perfect person to respond to some of those cases? No. Were they ever intended to? Absolutely not. The problem is this: unless you've taken the time to meet with all those other organizations, as I have, you take Joe Johnson that helps with mental health, social workers. I've got many that are friends. I sat down with them and asked them, tell me what you think, because you're being presented as a solution, but I'm not hearing any of you come forward and agree to that. So what's missing? Because obviously that's an important piece at the table. We can't just say, give it to them. What piece is missing? And they were all very clear that anytime they respond to situations, they will never go without an officer. And part of that has to do with who gets to be the person to decide what type of case and what type of response is needed. Is it just the person on the phone calling? How do they know whether it's violent or not? The person answering the call, they don't know whether it's a violent situation or not. So while I think that there are ways that we can work toward coming to a better solution for some of those situations, and I think that that is a real conversation we need to be having. However, it's not as easy as just flip the switch, give this money to social workers and send them on their way to certain calls. It's more of a systematic approach. We have to know which calls to send different response units to. And there is not a process in place currently that would allow us to do that safely. So we've got officers that are concerned on many calls that they go on. Imagine somebody who's just walking up to a door that doesn't have any kind of training or any way to protect themselves. We have to consider the entire picture and make sure that organizations like that are very important, and they do go on calls. It's not like we don't do that, but we need to make sure that everybody's on board with talking through a complete approach to this. There are some cities I've heard that have been successful with some of these programs. I'm not saying we don't need to look into it, but I am not interested in defunding the police. Just flip it overnight, defund the police, and we'll suddenly have a solution. It doesn't work that way. It's not going to work that way. I wouldn't support it. Not once would I entertain that. But I would like to have the conversation about what other options or opportunities are there for our officers to stay focused on what they need to be, crime, specifically crime related, and cases that are not necessarily crime, not necessarily violent. How can we better serve those citizens another way? I am all about that conversation, but not at the cost of defunding the police to get there. No, absolutely not.
I think that it's not a one size fits all. So we have people that don't feel safe in their communities because of what's going on. And so we really need to focus on things that bring the community back together. We need to focus on what's causing these things. And I feel like we have a very militarized training in the police. And I think we need to work on de-escalation and work on ways to get the community involved in finding out which laws need to be against us and which laws need to be kind of taken off the books. Honestly, I don't feel like the majority of the laws that we have for drugs are really doing much, except for creating more crime. That doesn't necessarily have to be that way. I really just feel like we need to get together as a community to reevaluate that relationship.